All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to wait a couple minutes for people to join if you're just joining us right now. Really excited to have you join the stellar panel that we put together for you to talk about, advertisements and what happens when Facebook and Google political ads are no longer there. So looking forward. We'll give everyone a few minutes to get settled in. For those of you who are just joining us, we're going to give it a few minutes to make sure people can sign on and get ready for our panel. My name is William Lopez, the Vice President of Customer Success, and looking forward to speaking with everyone. All right. Okay, well, first of all, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're located. We're super excited to have you on board on what to do next, the next time Facebook and Google halt political ads. We have a stellar, amazing panel that we're going to be talking to today, and it's going to give us some of their insights that live in this world, breathe in this world, and actually do incredible work in this world. My name is William Lopez. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success here at Phone to Action. We're really excited to have each and every one of you join us today and join us as part of this conversation. A few items that I want to make sure that we go over. Before we jump right into the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please put them onto our Zoom, type that into the chat, and we'll be able to respond to them throughout at the end of our panel. The other thing here too is that if you can't hear or you're having issues with the video, one of our staff members are actually monitoring the conversation. So just put that into the chat as well. They'll be able to help you out also. And with that, let's jump right in. It's no secret, Phone to Action has recently made some incredible acquisitions. We did them at the end of last year. We've acquired GovPredict and KnowWho, and we're now the premier solution for all the work that you do. So when you think about mobilizing your advocates or tracking legislations and bills and understanding who the co-sponsors are, you can do that now within Phone to Action. Our category defining solutions help you monitor everything that affects your organization, find the right tools to influence policy and make it happen. We're now one vendor with the new category defining solutions that helps our customers stay on top of legislative and regulatory developments at all levels of the government. So when you're thinking about federal and state, even at the local level. We also help a lot of our organizations engage with their stakeholders and advocates who can help them drive desired legislative and regulatory outcomes. Now, Phone to Action is just incredible. I've been here for the past 5 years. We work with some incredible organizations. And if you're a current client, thank you, welcome back. Hope you enjoy the panel. If you're looking to buy Phone to Action or just looking to learn more, talk to one of our team members. We're more than happy to share with you some of the incredible stories and campaigns and ways that our organizations have used our platform. Now, into this panel itself, and why did we create it? Well, to kind of set the scene a little bit more, it's no secret. Facebook and Google halted political and social issue ads in the middle of probably the worst time in the beginning of the year, when a lot of organizations were looking to not only acquire new advocates, get ready for the legislative cycle, but also to increase their fundraising during the beginning of the year. And a lot of organizations were left scrambling. Where do we go? Where do we go to? How do we make sure that our conversions are at a good price? How do I make sure that we're getting to the right audience? What's the feedback that we're getting back? And so a lot of organizations came to us and asked us the same question. Where do I go? What do I do? And so we decided to create a stellar panel for you all to hear from that will live in this world and actually can provide some really great context and information around what to do if this were to happen again. What was really interesting during this time is that teams were also forced and organizations were forced to find new platforms and other ways to engage. For the most part, Facebook and Google have dominated this market, and we'll get into this a little bit more during Lindsay's part, but Facebook and Google have dominated this area so long, and they have to actually provide some robust tool sets and reporting. But where do you go to next? Do I try Snapchat? Does TikTok have ads? I don't know. But like the really great thing here is that there's other ways that opened up the opportunities for a lot of organizations to find other and experiment with different types of ad sets. Now, I always talk about this, right, which is how do you fly the plane and build it at the same time? And that's what happened with a lot of the organizations during this time. Normally during the beginning of the year, not only are you focused on engaging your advocates or looking for ways of increasing the communication that you send to members of Congress using digital ads by expanding your reach, but what other strategies are out there that's going to help you acquire, engage, and mobilize your supporters? Well, I'm very fortunate to have made these awesome connections in the years that I've worked here at Phone to Action, some more recent than others. And today's speakers are really incredible on this. Now, one thing I want to make sure that everyone understands is that our speakers here today are industry experts. They've been doing this for many, many years, and they understand the landscape better than most folks that we've worked with. And I'm really excited to have them on board. And so I'll let them introduce themselves. But Lindsay, let's kick it off with you if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Great. Hi, I'm Lindsay. I am the Associate VP of Advertising at Do Big Things. I have been at DBT for about 2 years now, and I've just been working in the digital ad space for the past 7 or 8 years now. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. We're excited to have you on board. Robert, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Robert Seacrest. I work for Acquire Digital. I started Acquire after 5 years in DC at the Republican State Leadership Committee, which is focused on down ballot races, everything below governor. And then from there, we started Acquire and started working with corporations and their advocacy efforts and that sort of thing. And I've been working with P2A for quite a while and really enjoy the product and can't wait to talk about what it's capable of doing.
That's how you know Robert's been with us. He feels comfortable calling us P2A, not Phone to Action. Thank you, Robert. We're excited to have you on board. Ori, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, Ori Renat. I'm the CEO of Urban Legend. We're a fairly new company launched last year, focused on making advocacy marketing dramatically more accountable. My background's in media. I worked for The Atlantic and National Journal and other publications for a number of years. I spent about 3 years in, authoring the Washington and the Information Age study for National Journal, where we looked at media habits and how folks within the influence and opinion leader space are engaging with content and media. And most recently, I served as the White House Chief Digital Officer.
Oh, excited to have you on board, Ori. Now, to jump right in, because I know this is such an interesting topic, we're going to start with you, Lindsay, because I think this is incredibly important. We talked about it during setting the context, but what are the strategies for diversifying your ad campaigns, right? Or even just your campaigns itself to kind of market individuals. So I'll let you just go ahead and jump in and then we can just take it from there. Okay. Awesome.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, so we are basically just now getting out of Facebook and Google's political ad ban. And we've definitely learned a lot at DBT since those ads have been down. We've definitely had to think outside of the box when it came to media planning and just finding new platforms that could help us achieve similar goals. But before I get into that, I just wanted to make sure I provided more context on the actual ban itself. So Google and Facebook banned political ads as well as social issue ads on their platforms just right after the 2020 election. It was part of a broader effort to just clamp down on any political misinformation and also just curb any confusion around sensitive events like the Capitol attack. So they were down for a while. Google just lifted their ad ban in late February, and then Facebook lifted their ban just recently in early March. So with that said, just thinking more about those two players specifically. So, when it comes to the internet in general, I think that it's safe to say that Facebook and Google are two major players, where people just, spend a vast majority of their screen time on those platforms. And in advertising specifically, we use Google search and YouTube for political campaigns. And obviously the social media platforms just have a huge presence in people's everyday lives. So they're definitely important tools in that realm, but also for advertising specifically. We love those platforms because we're able to track performance very easily. They're a bit more transparent compared to other ad platforms. They give us all of the metrics that we really need. Facebook has their ads library and Google has their transparency report. So if we wanted, although not perfect, we're able to go into those reports and get see other ads that competitors are running across both of those platforms. So, you can search by other advertisers, political candidates, see what creative they're using, how much they're spending, who they're targeting, and all of that. So, expanding to new platforms when those two were down was definitely a bit more difficult. With those key features in mind, it was harder for us to get a straight answer from these other vendors on, past performance data with competitors, or just getting standardized benchmarks was really hard, just harder than we had thought it would be. And also we're coming into that with having Facebook and Google set the standards of what we're expecting to see when it comes to transparency and just pricing in general. So, that's not to say other platforms were able to do the goals that we needed to be accomplished, like email acquisition and direct donate ads, but they just weren't coming in at the same value, with the quality of the leads that we were getting, and also just the actual price.
I would imagine that one of the questions that, our customers probably faced during that time, or organizations faced during that time, was really around, where do we go? And how do we know that that's going to work, right? And I think you and I had talked about this before. It really depends on your North Star, right? Whether you just want to acquire emails, or do you want to get people to take action, which I think those are two different questions. How did you help organizations navigate that, and also reset expectations on pricing for that as well?
Yeah. Thinking about it from a goals perspective specifically, if the client's goal was awareness, that wasn't impacted too badly, because we would be able to still use our typical vendors that really focused on impressions and video views, that would help us increase brand recognition. So, like programmatic, connected TV, streaming, any of that. So in that world, we weren't too affected, but we were mostly affected with our email acquisition and direct donate campaigns that we were looking to run. So that's kind of where we needed to set expectations with which new platforms to use and the pricing against each. So I can get into that a little bit too, just the specifics there. So for email acquisition, we leaned more into our fixed rate partners, so like the Daily Koses, the Care2s of the world, and we were also leaning more into Snapchat and some programmatic like Outbrain. And there's pros and cons for each of those with all of these new platforms that we're experimenting with. So with fixed rate, with the Daily Kos or Care2, you're able to get those cheaper names. It usually ranges between like $1 to $2, and that's great. And if you want to grow your list quickly, but it also, we have seen that those users generally aren't as engaged as the users from other platforms like Facebook or Google. But then there's Snapchat, and that's where you can get creative with the different ads that you're using. But there's restrictions there with the audience targeting, it's not as robust. And then also the CPAs we were seeing there were more in like the $15 to $20 range. So more expensive from what we were seeing on Facebook for sure.
Got it.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Lindsay. Sorry.
I was just going to say with the last one with Outbrain, that was another specific one that we were experimenting with too. And we did see that one had stronger click-through rates, but very high CPAs. So in the $50 range. Again, definitely take these numbers with a grain of salt because we only ran a handful of campaigns with those platforms while Facebook and Google were down. But I think that it was important to experiment and kind of, expand our knowledge on different platforms in order to give the answers to our clients in the future of what they should expect.
2 questions, and then we can move on into some of the other kind of like tips that we want people to walk away with. One, do you find that DPT is going to continue doing ads and ad campaigns in these different platforms just in case it happens again? And then the second question, let's start with the first and then I'll go into the second. Let's do that.
Yeah, I would say yes. I think that, even though it sucked to have to deal with the ad ban, it actually really did challenge us to get more creative. And also now we've made all of these new connections with different vendors, and we're seeing the benefits, outside of list building. There are a lot of other benefits like brand recognition and, just making sure that you're present across a bunch of different digital outlets. So I would say, even though they don't exactly measure up to Facebook and Google, those are more of our, bread and butter kind of platforms. But I think that we will definitely be using this as a best practice to continue to have these other vendors as new tools in our toolbox in order to be a bit different and unique.
Oh, that's awesome. And then the last question that I have is like, what are some of the tips that you would recommend an organization get ready for now? Just in case they were to happen, Facebook and Google. I think you said this best during the background piece, right? Facebook and Google did this in response to what was happening on their platform due to the political pressures and public pressure on shutting it down so there wasn't an influence or negative influence on, what was happening in the States. I think the question is now more, we can anticipate that might happen again. If so, what are things that organizations can do now with their agencies or with organizations that do a lot of the ad buying for them to do acquisition campaigns and whatnot to prepare them for that situation?
Yeah, I would say to just, it's been really valuable for us for making these connections and just doing your research on those new vendors that you're going with. And we've tried a handful of new vendors now, and now we're gaining that background information so that we can say, this is the best direction to go if you're looking to go in that route. But also just know that it's not the end of the world if Facebook and Google go down again. You're able to still advertise online, but it's just a matter of managing expectations. So it may just be the new normal that, your CPAs are going to be higher, but you can focus on some positive aspects of these new vendors too, of just, the impressions that you're getting, the other engagement that you're still acquiring, even though the big players are not in the picture.
And I think we said this best during the slide, right? It's diversifying your advertisement portfolio, right?
Yep.
Making sure that not only are you using Facebook and Google for, majority of your ad sets. And we all know why we use Facebook and Google. You can get very low CPAs and get some really good engagement from them, but it's really looking at Snapchat, Outbrain, and some of these other platforms that are going to allow you to be successful, Outbrain, to be successful in different types of tactics, or even trying out, maybe use Snapchat for fundraising to see if that's effective compared to using Google or even Facebook. So awesome. Any last tips for our organizations that are on here?
I would just say, that it's, not the end of the world if Facebook and Google are down again. I'm saying that now, but you asked me 2 months ago, I probably would be saying it's the end of the world, but it's okay if they go down again. And, it challenges you to think outside the box to still achieve your goals, just in different ways.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. Really appreciate it. We'll come back to you in a couple of the Q&A if there's any questions at the end. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right. So how do you build a successful campaign? Lindsay said this best. She said, we have to diversify the way that we're engaging, and acquiring new advocates or new leads that are going to come in and either donate or take action with us. And so, Robert, you've used Phone to Action for several years, and I know you've worked with several organizations to do this. Love to hear a little bit more about your experience with Phone to Action, our API, and the different ways that you've engaged for it, especially with LinkedIn.
Sure. Yeah. No. The API really excites us and what you can do with it with the Phone to Action tool, because it does two things, right? It enhances the type of connection you can make with the legislator, or whoever you're targeting, and then it can also enhances your advertising options, and we'll talk about that with the LinkedIn. As an example, I mean, one of the things that we've done with the API is we've been able to, once people type in their information, generate an email, and then insert, give them the option to do a video recording or an audio recording, and then drop that into the email to the legislator as well. And that's all done via the back end of the API. One of the other kind of utilities you can do to build a community is kind of take those videos and build how to go directly into a YouTube channel. And then, after you editorial approval, you can make that public as well, and kind of show in different channels how people are really kind of fired up for that particular cause. The other thing that we really like about the API is that it actually kind of, it allows you to use the Phone to Action data and abilities to really enhance your current CRM that you might use, or you can even use it as its own CRM. So you can do different things. Every kind of online action that you do, when someone fills out a form, a P2A form, or texts in and that sort of thing, you can put them into a drip marketing funnel. You can put them into, a delayed letter campaign through the USPS, so a snail mail and a postcard, to really kind of echo the original email message. So what we've seen is that everybody's doing emails and that sort of thing, and phone calls. It's nice to do kind of every approach, every prong that you can, and I think the API makes that a lot easier. So that would be the one thing. And then with the advertising part of it, we'll talk about the LinkedIn. I think what's really why would you use LinkedIn? I think if scale and quantity isn't your main concern, and it's like, say you're the realtors and you want just realtors to be able to write a letter to someone, or you're dentist and you want just dentists to write a letter to someone, or whatever it is, not just anybody, but you want the professional class to actually write that. LinkedIn's data makes that a lot more effective. Now, it is much more expensive cost per acquisition than your Facebook, but it's more tailored. And what we find is, with those different campaigns, you can ask people to do even more than just write an email or record a video. They can write an op-ed letter for their local newspaper. They can be precinct captains and that sort of thing. So LinkedIn for us is a very good lead generator for kind of identifying super advocates, as it were. And to that end, you can actually connect lead gen ads that are very similar to Facebook ads using the Phone to Action API. And I know, Will, you've got documents to help people kind of walk through that. But that's another thing that I think is really, as you think about kind of life without Facebook and Google, how else can you do a really impactful campaign? I think getting people like on LinkedIn and anywhere really, any platform really that has an API, getting them into your world and your data set is probably the key and the main goal.
Have you seen, and I think you're absolutely correct, right? Like, our API allows people to connect with different stuff. And so making sure that you're using a platform that has the flexibility to connect with different types of ad sets, it's really important. And I know Acquire has really done that for a lot of their partners. From what you saw during the Google and Facebook being out of like the ring, let's just say, what other, you mentioned, I know in the conversations, you also talked about Roku possibly being one of those platforms that people can use and seeing some really good conversions from there. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Roku, and I don't want to speak for Roku, but I will say that they have really enhanced their advocacy product. So I do, they've got, I can't remember, I don't have it in front of me, but their CTR was something like, 0.22%, which is pretty decent for what you think it's a linear, advertisement on a TV. So they've got like companion banners and that sort of thing. So basically what you do is you see this maybe a 15-second spot, talking about your issue, and then you can push a button on your remote and it links to your cell phone and sends you a text message and kind of loops you into that world. And so you can connect that via API to phone to action, and then start putting them in that drip funneling and getting them to convert. So there are other channels that you can hop into, in a world, hopefully to echo the previous speaker, Lindsay, in a world without, hopefully not a world without Facebook and Google. But yeah, there are some tools you can still use out there.
From your experience, Robert, have you seen any comparable platforms outside of Facebook or Google, or anyone during the time that it was shut down that probably was trying to keep up with Facebook and Google and take on some of that business? Do you see anything like, was Snapchat or was Roku or was somebody else coming in and saying, hey, you can do exactly what you're doing on Facebook and Google, just use our platform now? That might be comparable, or possibly will be comparable in 6 months.
Yeah, for our clients, it was more of an immediate need. So it wasn't like hey, let's figure out a long-term solution to building more advocates. It's okay, we can't use that. What do we do? And so it became more, okay, we'll leverage your current customers that you may or may not have. If you don't have, let's look at the voter file and run a more traditional political campaign to try to get them to act. So that's, calls and snail mail and that sort of thing to try to get them to take action, even radio ads and that sort of thing. So from my perspective, and I think the other speakers probably can speak better to this. As far as the other platforms that were trying to fill that void, I didn't see a lot, but we were again trying to focus on our immediate battles and not the overall kind of part of it, the overall war.
Awesome. Same question to you, Lindsay. Did you see any one of the other type of ads that might eventually get to the point of Facebook and Google?
Yeah, that's hard to say. I think that Snapchat was probably the best contender, but I think, I wouldn't be surprised if some platforms come out of the woodworks and become bigger competitors, like the TikToks of the world. That's something that I'm hoping to see that would come down the pipeline. But yeah, not so much right now.
Robert, what is one tip that you want to leave folks with using the API and trying different platforms? Oh, I think you're on mute, Robert.
Sorry about that. I think it's keeping an open mind and trying different things. Like, don't we get into this transactional mindset where it's like, okay, we need X amount of emails to these legislators, and that I think if you keep an open mind and say, okay, well, maybe a video email is worth 10 emails, that sort of thing, and try to figure out how you can leverage. Not every impression is equal, I guess. So not every email is equal. So figure out a way to really customize the experience, again, not only for the legislators and hearing from their constituents, but also customizing that experience and making it easy for the people that you're advertising to. So I think just keeping that open mind and trying to think creatively of how else you can talk to people, talk to legislators, and then working backwards from there, and how to do it on the front end, I think is key.
Perfect. I think that goes well with what Lindsay said, which is, diversifying your portfolio of ad campaigns and trying new things, experimenting. And now also maybe not so much on the ad set side always, but also experimenting the ways that you communicate to the lawmakers and trying different methods of communications that are going to help them. And you can definitely do that with the different types of platforms that you're going to be using. And I think something about Google and Facebook being shut down that really made that easier for people to accept and swallow. Like, higher CPAs is okay as long as I have this North Star of sending letters and emails to members of Congress, as one example. So thank you, Robert. We'll get back to you in a little bit, but I'll hand it off to Ori. Ori, tell us a little bit more about strategies for campaigns. I know that we've talked about different platforms. We talked about, making sure that you have the right tools that allow you to be flexible on this. I think you're in a very unique space, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the background with the losses of Facebook and Google and fixed rates and whatnot. So let you take it away.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying I think this is a great conversation to be having, even more broadly than just in the context of the Facebook and Google ad bans, because the landscape with these companies and these platforms is constantly changing. And Google, for example, isn't the traffic driver it once was, because more than half of Google searches now don't result in a click. Instead, people are getting information on knowledge panels and the one cards directly within the Google experience. And that's not ill intent from Google. They think that's a better user experience. It's an easier way for people to discover information. But those constant changes, whether it's that or Facebook's algorithm, those impact the ways in which we run advocacy ads all the time. And so even if Facebook and Google are here to stay, the ways in which we use them have to constantly evolve. And so, yeah, as you said, Will, we're a little bit of a different situation. We're a platform as well, and we launched Urban Legend last year to let advocacy organizations and brands mobilize what are effectively influencers, highly vetted creators. And our platform lets these creators log in and see campaigns they can post for causes and issues and brands, and gives them a specific action goal, like sending letters to Congress through phone to action, or registering for an event, or signing up for a newsletter. And it pays them, the creators, for those specific actions and only for those. And so it's a cost per action platform. I'm happy to share more about it offline with folks who are interested, but I want to stay away from the sales pitch today, and instead highlight some of the learnings I think that were really important for us, the best practices we found and our clients found when Google and Facebook weren't an option. And of course, these strategies and these lessons worked well on our platform, but I think they're really applicable no matter what channels we're using in advocacy campaigns. The first is authenticity. And it's become so easy for audiences to ignore or click right past or go right past traditional ads, whether they're print, digital, social, because they've built up the habit and the mental expectation that those are inauthentic content. The same trend is even starting to emerge in traditional influencer marketing, where influencers are pushing products and the sale of products. And so what we found is the importance of having authentic voices provide a trusted introduction to an issue. And creators or influencers, especially outside of Washington, have the brand permission to explain an issue in more detail, to get the audience to slow down and listen for 30, 40, 50 seconds, which is a lifetime in the digital space, to understand why an issue matters. And we've seen those creators successfully mobilize in verticals like health and wellness, energy, environment, innovation, diversity and inclusion. Parenting creators are unbelievably impactful across different kinds of advocacy issues. And that trusted introduction is key and more impactful than anything a traditional ad could ever deliver. What we found is that when we start with that introduction from somebody the audience chose to follow, we get higher conversion rates. And we also get other indicators of real investment. For example, audience members that come through those kinds of introductions are more likely to customize a letter before sending it to legislators or before sending along a regulatory comment. That's an indicator, we think, of real investment. And so next point here is around strategies to make campaigns more engaging. What we found, as I said a second ago, is that audiences tend to blow past traditional ads. And when they do click, whether that's 0.1 or 0.01% of the time in the display space, their engagement is a drive-by. They aren't as primed. If you think about all the ads we see on various websites, like when I used to work at National Journal, the ads we used to run, or the ads we hear on the radio, companyx.com/innovation, learn more. Learn more about what and why. Campaigns should be built around driving an audience to take an action, even in an awareness campaign. What action indicates that the awareness play resonated? What we found is that we need to find the indicators of that awareness taking hold and that action and build campaigns around them. Reach and impressions aren't concrete enough, and we've come to rely on them. And the reason Facebook has actually been so successful is its ability to let us move beyond them with things like their pixel and to show us what audiences did downstream. When you combine the authentic introduction I mentioned with a reason for the audience to actually take an action, you get great results, and the audience ends up being more active and engaged downstream, even in an awareness play. If the goal is a click through and they do click, they stay longer. If the goal is a newsletter sign up, they're more likely to open and engage later. The last point we're going to talk about is accountability. And I think one of the biggest challenges in advocacy marketing as compared to product marketing is accountability and the risk that results from that lack of accountability. We believe that when you're running an advocacy campaign, you should be able to set the value of a specific audience action, say sending an advocacy letter to Congress through phone to action. And the platforms and vendors we're using to advertise should be willing to guarantee those results and should be able to stand by their products. Earlier in the webinar, we talked about how CPAs were going up when Facebook and Google aren't available. And that's to be expected because there's more market demand. But there shouldn't be this risk of a campaign totally bombing, leaving people paying $5 for a click or $70 for a newsletter sign up. Those horror stories happen far too often and have for years. I was working with a client back in 2014, 2015 that ended up paying $600 per letter to Congress using Facebook ads because nobody ever had the conversation of saying, okay, how much is this worth? What's the price we're not going to go above? Because at some point the ROI just isn't there. And the Facebook model was layered with so much data, and the pixel gave advertisers ways to mitigate that risk. But when that wasn't an option, we saw too many people start taking on that risk again. And so our platform is really built around, like I said, that cost per action model. And our creators see those results in real time. And so the transparency gives them and the clients that same information and the ability to optimize for what's working to drive more and more audience actions when everybody's incentives are really aligned. And the accountability goes back to knowing that the actions are high value, that the only thing clients are paying for are those actual actions and not overpaying. And our platform is certainly not the only way to do that. I think there's some really great ways to build that into the Facebook model, as well as some of the other things we've talked about on today's call. But I think our big takeaway from the period of time where Facebook and Google weren't around, and I'll say it was a great time for Urban Legend because those are our competitors, so it was fun. But our big takeaway is the importance of understanding the value of an action and holding all platforms and vendors accountable to not going beyond that value and ensuring that built-in ROI.
That's awesome. Ori, you know what? I know we don't want to make this a sales pitch, but I'd love to hear, or probably if we can share this with everyone who's on the call today or on the webinar today, a little bit about how this works on your platform. That'll be awesome because, you know, I think you've created, and I know this because you and I have worked together and we've had some customers that have used this. I know that you've created a platform that not only drives authentic, engaging, but accountable campaigns, but it is a new platform of engaging that I think needs to be explored because now it's kind of like the development of advocacy, right? At one point, no one on Facebook was posting, hey, call your lawmaker, call your lawmaker, call your lawmaker. And then there was this huge shift that said, hey, call your lawmaker now, let's get people to engage. And you saw a spike in individuals calling and engaging or getting civically engaged because their friends and their families and people they trusted, people they followed, started taking action that way. I'd love to hear a little bit more about like how your platform kind of bridges that gap of trust that is created between the person you're trying to reach and the individual that's taking your the ad set and actually posting it on their platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So you really nailed a lot of the why of it, that we need people to be able to understand why they're taking action and that the every new model of advertising has effectively been used in the advocacy space somewhere down the line. And we think that influencer marketing can be done accountably in a measurable way to do it. And so the way the platform works is that clients who are looking to drive particular actions, whether those are letters to Congress, newsletter signups, event registrations, white paper downloads, visits to a landing page, will use our platform to say, great, we'd like to mobilize creators from a certain type of vertical to drive their audience to take that action. And we have a little over 500 creators who are currently part of our network. We're adding more every week, who are vetted very carefully to make sure that they're brand safe, that they have really high and authentic engagement, and they can credibly speak about these issues to their audiences. And when these creators log in, they'll see the opportunities we've assigned them to post certain campaigns. And for each one, they'll get a creative brief, messaging guidance about how to talk about the issue, what phraseology to use, what words to stay away from. And they'll see a particular audience goal, like say letters to Congress, and they'll see how much they'll be paid each time somebody in their audience takes that action. We tell them to only post campaigns they genuinely agree with and would be posting even if not for the money. And if they agree with the goal, they join the campaign and the platform generates custom links for each of their channels. And they go ahead and post in their own words, authentically, as I said earlier, but in line with the message brief about the issue and drive their audience to use those links. And then we're able to measure in real time when the audience took the particular action that is the goal of the campaign. The really important part that goes to accountability is that that cost per action rate is set by our clients, not by us. And so a client might say, hey, on Facebook, I'm paying $3 per subscription. I don't want to pay more than that on Urban Legend. And that's fine. That's exactly how it works. So that's the broad overview. And again, it goes to the authentic, engaging, accountable kind of standard we've set that I think can be achieved on a lot of different platforms. We think that the influencer layer adds a ton of brand lift and awareness and added value content too. The not having to create hundreds of different Facebook ads because the influencers are doing that for us. And they're great at writing copy their audience is gonna like.
Awesome, thank you, Ori. That reminds me, there was we did an analysis of individuals or advocates that took action on phone to action in the midst or the height of COVID. So right after March 15th, between March 15th all the way to June. And so if you go onto our website, you can actually read a lot of those stats. It's called the State of Advocacy Report 2020. One thing we found during that time period is that authentic reach. We saw about a 400% increase of new advocates coming onto any individual account that our organizations were using. And they were clicking on links that were shared on social, Facebook and Twitter from a family or friend. So let's say I take action on the campaign, I share the Facebook link or the campaign on Facebook and on Twitter, and then my family and my friends were taking action on it. So there's a need in there for that authenticity, which I think gets created with it. And honestly, it could also be a response to the political pressures of inauthenticity that Google and Facebook faced last year or the years prior to that because of all the election items that were happening. So awesome. Thank you, Ori, for that. Really appreciate it. Now, policy influencer, this is something that we have access to. You have access to find the right policy influence. This goes back to the authenticity of it all, making sure that you have people that you can engage. But one of the things I want to make sure that folks walk away with is the ability to use phone to action to find the right policies and engage the right individuals that will take action on your campaigns. And so that's really important for us. I also want to make sure that we're setting up time for Q&A. And we actually have a question that has come in, and I believe, Ori, this is for you. So give me a quick second while I pull it up. It says, it's from one of our guests today. It says, is it necessarily a bad thing for clients if 50% of people on Google aren't clicking on the link, but getting their answer on the main page? Would it still be important to get your message seen, even if it's not clicked? So I guess that goes to the question of impressions versus click.
So no, it's not a bad thing at all. I think the question is what they're seeing and not clicking on your message. The way Google's designed it is around things like knowledge panels and the one cards. These are not often content that is ad driven at all. And so it's not that you could buy your way into these spots. There are ways in which some organizations have done a really good job at what I would call SEO plus in getting their information in ways that can be digested by Google and pulled into these experiences. It's also really important for organizations to claim their own knowledge panels for themselves, for their executives and leadership. That's a organic way of ensuring visibility in that new Google ecosystem. It doesn't cost any money at all. I think too few organizations have done that so far. The difference is that non-click behavior can't be measured and can't be captured into a downstream action. And so it's not an either or. It's not that we can say, hey, at least our message was seen on Google, even if it wasn't clicked on. It's that non-click behavior is going to other types of information, meaning that we need to keep adjusting the ways in which we run paid ads to be able to capture the actions we're looking for.
Got it. Thank you, Ori. Now, I want to give everyone an opportunity. We have one last question in here from one of our panelists. It says, how do we go ahead? Let me try to synthesize this a little bit more. How do we select what the best platform will be for us to leverage advertisements if Facebook and Google decide to go out? So Lindsay, I know you've done a lot of this with Do Big Things. I'll shoot it over to your way.
Yeah, I would first just think about the goal that you're trying to achieve before thinking about the platform. So, if the goal is to, you have a really cool video that you want to use and make sure that it's being, put in the spotlight, then, think about what platforms would best fit that creative. And that would be kind of the route that I would go instead of, it can be very overwhelming because there are a lot of options. So I think that the most important thing is to make sure you have a good understanding of your top 1 to 3 goals for that particular campaign.
Got it. Thank you, Lindsay. And then team, what is one thing you would want everyone to walk away with today after this panel? Let's start with the reverse Ori. Ori, we'll start with you.
That the Facebook changes and the Google changes are actually a huge opportunity to try new things like Lindsay's done, to get better at that coordination between platforms and ads, as Robert was talking about, but also to make sure that we are being really, really careful and accountable with our budgets and our clients' budgets, and to take a good hard look at why we were spending so much money on Facebook and Google to begin with.
Awesome. Thank you, Ori. Robert, how about you?
Yeah, I really like that point. Take a good look at why you're spending that much money, because when everybody's doing that, it gets a little diluted. So I think that's a good point. Is look at your budget and figure out what Lindsay was saying, what your goals are, and figure out, if you're trying to talk to a state senator or trying to communicate to a state senator in Tennessee, maybe sponsoring a local blog in his district is a better move than just pouring more money into Facebook. So I think looking at all these different things is important.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Lindsay, you'll wrap us up.
Great. Yeah, I agree with you guys as well. And also just to prioritize testing. I think that this has really opened our eyes to diversifying our advertising portfolios, and it's given us a lot of more confidence to move forward in that direction. So I think testing with platforms as well as across all the different targeting and creative options is a good idea.
One thing I heard out of all 3 of you is that just because Facebook and Google are down doesn't mean that your activity or the level of activity is down. It's just a shift in mindset, a shift in tactic, and an experimentation of all of it. You can still achieve your goals, even if you're using Snapchat or if you're using LinkedIn or if you're using Urban Legend. So explore those different options to do that. So I want to say a big thank you to Lindsay, Robert, and Ori. Thank you to all of our guests who joined us today. We are recording this and we'll send a follow-up email after this, but really appreciate everyone taking your time. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.